In A24's newest film, Death of a Unicorn, a father and daughter, played by Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega, accidentally hit and kill a unicorn while en route to a weekend retreat, where his billionaire boss seeks to exploit this creature's curative properties. What begins as a grim fairy tale then settles in as a rich people satire, which, in my opinion, doesn't really do itself any favors. Director Alex Scharfman may come in with comedy horror and practical VFX in mind, but his script comes out pretty half-baked. Much like The Menu or the recent film from A24, Opus, Death of a Unicorn uses its audience surrogate main character to show how absurd and immoral immense wealth can be. In this case, though, Jenna Ortega plays Paul Rudd's art historian daughter, who's completely disillusioned with the wealth her father's obsessed with. But once the dead mom trope hits, their family dynamic becomes the supposed heart of the film. This is despite the goofy and exaggerated ignorance of Paul Rudd's boss and his family. Featuring Richard E. Grant, T. Leoni, and Will Poulter, this family reads as typically privileged and self-centered, and they basically remain that way for the entire movie. Will Poulter specifically, though, is such a fun performer. I think it's hard to exaggerate how great he is in this movie. In Midsommar's director's cut, Will Poulter delivered a pretty similar performance to this one. A slimy weirdo who is obsessed with approval. One of my favorite lines is actually from him. I don't know if I can show it in the actual video, but there's a scene where he's asking about the curative properties of the unicorn's blood, and they find out they can cure cancer. And then he responds, "Cancer? That's like one of the worst ones." And the way he says it is just so hilarious and stupid. It just works for this tone. But no matter how fun its satire and unicorn slasher sequences are, most of the film is shooting way off mark, but still hitting the broadest target. Like, I agree with what it's saying, but it neither challenges itself or is confident enough to edit out its more rambly scenes. Looking at films like Louis Buñuel's discreet charm of the bourgeoisie, or even the contemporary The Menu, they thrive on peculiar character details and off-kilter dialogue. Scharfman's film, however, feels far more middlebrow, even safer. Nothing has bite, and it ends up just gnawing at the bones of what those previous films did. There isn't much left to explore with rich people satires, so its underexplored sci-fi fantasy concept ends up being pretty wasted. Sure, the VFX are fun. I mean, I love the fact that they actually built a real unicorn for this movie. That's crazy. But that doesn't really make a movie, especially one that goes on almost for an hour and 40 minutes. And especially one that is so dependent on its emotional finale. I mean, they really try to mine at the heart of Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega's relationship, but there's not much there outside of the dead mom trope and this father trying to do what he can for his daughter. Of course, these are decent performances. I mean, I believe the fact that they are father and daughter, but since the rest of the movie feels pretty half-baked, this ends up the worst case of it. I don't really know much about Jenna Ortega's character, and I end up not really knowing anything at all about Paul Rudd's character. All I know is that these characters are played by really famous actors and they're doing their best with what they're given. Speaking of people that do the best with what they're given, Anthony Carrigan, I have to mention him. He is fantastic in this movie for what little screen time he's given. The little stares and his attempts to appease this rich family. He's just so fantastic in this. I really hope he's able to work in more films in the future. His work on Barry is just incredible. I love that show so much, and he is one of the reasons why that show works. So to see him in something like this it's definitely a highlight. So if anything I would recommend this movie based on, it would be maybe the performances by Will Poulter and some of the other characters, especially Anthony Carrigan, and maybe some of the VFX sequences. I mean, the unicorn stuff is pretty cool. I do love the fact that a lot of the stuff is practical, despite how much VFX they actually did. But damn, man, this feels pretty wasted. And like I said, I can't. There's no other word that really describes this movie other than half-baked. It really is half-baked. So I can't help myself but to give this movie a 5 out of 10. It's pretty middling, pretty middlebrow. Doesn't really do much in terms of its concept. I just wish it was more. And honestly, if we can do the world of cinema a favor, can we stop making these middlebrow, half-baked, rich people bad movies? Rich people, they are bad. But there's more ways of exploring this concept than just being like, look at how horrible these people are. Like, you know, there's more ways to explore this. I don't know. It just becomes pretty boring. And ultimately, kind of like an SNL script, if I'm being honest. But yeah, it's pretty middling. I wouldn't recommend it. But hopefully we get some cooler stuff from this director. I think he's got talent. So we'll see.